A very good day to you and welcome to yet another episode of the Election Watch program, proudly brought to you by the Civio Institute. Over the past 5 episodes, we have been discussing with young people, what do young people have to do with elections? What does the church have to do with elections? What does civil society and peace builders have to do with elections? And we've seen some of the challenges as we're drawing closer to our elections, but also some of the areas that we can actually fix and build towards our nation building and development. Today, we want to discuss some of the outstanding issues, asking the key question, is Zimbabwe really ready for elections? The Electoral Act, Chapter 2, Section 13, gives detailed guidelines on all aspects of the conduct of elections, such as voter registration, proclamation of general elections, voter education, election observation, nomination candidates, postal voting, special voting, illegal practices, conflict management, and so much more. But we're here to ask the key question, what are some of the outstanding issues and what bearing could they have on the electoral process? Well, I'm not the expert here, and I have experts ready to have this discussion. I have with me Tamuka Chirimamboa, who's an independent consultant, and Varaizo Zhou, who's from the Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence, and she is the Gender and Membership Officer. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, so I'll start off with Varaizo. Varaizo, after the 2018 elections, a number of electoral reforms were called for. And I think maybe our key question would be, has enough been done to ensure that, we have a free, fair and ethical election?
Yeah, thank you. I would say not much has been done in regards to the issue of electoral reforms ahead of the 2023 elections. Some would want to actually note that maybe the extension of the quota system was a notable change in regards to the electoral reforms. However, we dispute and say that we were not hoping for the extension of the quota system. We were hoping for the implementation of the constitutional provisions of Section 17, 56 and 80, which speaks to gender equality, which means that women and men should equally be represented. Yeah. However, the extension of the quota system has not done that. As we can see, the number of women that are actually contesting in this election has dropped from 14% to actually 11% with the help of the quota system. So if we had implemented and aligned the Constitution to the Electoral Act, we would have more women participating in this election than the numbers that we have right now.
Okay. Tamuka, as a consultant, what are some of the major challenges or issues that the Electoral Commission has experienced with the run-up to these elections?
The Electoral Commission, which is ZEC, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, experienced quite a number of challenges, which actually is most likely going to impact the elections. And quite a number of serious allegations and violations of malpractices and also partisanship. Yeah. If you may want to start, the beginning point could be the voters' roll. First of all, yes, the access to the voters' roll has been an issue. The Electoral Commission has always behaved as if the voters' roll is their secret magic or secret formula, which they have intellectual property rights, or a trade secret which they can't share. Yet this is a public document which should be publicly available, particularly to interested stakeholders, that is to those aspiring candidates, to those who are also participating as candidates, and then of course to political parties. So even if you see our voters' roll is supposed to be polling station based, but if you see what ZEC has given people, it's not a polling station based voters' roll. So whatever they've given them, you would find, and what is going to be used on the electoral day, elections day, you will see that there's actually a big variance there. So it means even if political actors want to use it in order to know the boundaries or where to campaign, you'd find it to be a problem. And already that issue which I'm talking about, the boundaries, we had people who were disqualified on nomination at the nomination courts because ZEC was claiming that these people were nominated by people in wrong wards, wrong boundaries. And this could have been averted if ZEC had made this document publicly. But because it's held as a secret, so in the end, people go to nomination without knowing who exactly is within which ward and so forth. So hence we have this discrepancy, and already that's a minus. And then you want even to go to even the voters' roll. For instance, take the issue, I think the media is, it was the Media Institute which wrote a complaint to ZEC and Potras, a letter, where they were questioning how some political candidates, managed to be sending messages to candidates in specific constituents and to their numbers.
Yes.
And the questions, who has got the numbers? Yes, all the mobile companies have got numbers and details, but I doubt if Econet, Net1 and Telesur have got the details who is in which constituency. Like for example, myself, I'm voting, I'm in Chipinge South and in Ward 27.
Yeah.
And I received a personalized message. And the question is, and I actually have it on my phone, it's all that I see. And the question which I was asking, this person, I've never interacted, I'm not even part of that party, how did they get my details? So it's also a minus. And then you can even go to issues around the postal ballot itself. If you look at the court challenges that have come, because first there were issues to do with the disenfranchisement of certain voters, though you can't entirely say, okay, this is on the shoulders of ZEC, but people going to courts, but it brings in the issue, the role of the judiciary in elections and the disenfranchisement, raising constitutional issues, and even the judiciary not being decisive on some of these matters and bringing conclusivity and bringing judgments which are perceived not to be just and fair, because they are dealing with fundamental rights of citizens or constitutional. So when you bring this in, and now the issues of the parliament, that ZEC now has to unilaterally change the statute when it issued an SI on the dates of the polling station or of the postal ballot, extending it, I think, to 2 days before. Is it 2 days before voting? Yet when you look at in terms of our laws, it's quite clear that any electoral law that is made after the proclamation of the elections cannot be applicable to that election. It has to be applicable to the next election.
Thanks so much, Tamuka, for that. Obviously, we have serious challenges that we'll eventually keep addressing as we go along the way. But I want to bring you into the conversation, Varaizo. Let's look at how outstanding reforms or issues affect participation of key groups such as women and youth.
Okay, thank you. As someone who works with young women and women with disabilities, I would say outstanding electoral reforms have a negative impact on women's participation in leadership and politics. The first one being the lack of a conducive environment is not okay for women to participate. The environment is so violent. It has got physical violence, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, body shaming, trolling. We talk about all those things that affect women to participate in leadership. We have had examples of Linda Masarira, Fadzai Maeri, Netsai Marova being trolled on social media, being cyberbullied. So most women then tend to shy away from participating in elections because of those things. And we also go on to issues of vote buying, issues of lack of resources for women. We know that most women are not formally employed. And with the burden of unpaid care work, most women do not have a sound financial background. So for women to then be able to have a successful campaign, run a successful campaign, and also maybe take part in vote buying, they can't really do that. And this has resulted in less women taking part in leadership. And from the evidence from the primary elections and candidate selection processes that happened for the two major political parties, ZANU-PF and Triple C, with young women complaining about issues of vote buying, that they lost most of their voters to their male counterparts because they didn't have money to finance their campaign and also to do vote buying. So I would actually say these outstanding electoral reforms, lack of a conducive environment, issues of political violence, issues of vote buying, and lack of legal frameworks that guarantee gender equality have a negative impact on women's participation. And to date, as we're going into the elections, we can actually see that the government has failed to align the Constitution and the Electoral Act to guarantee gender equality. Section 1756 and 80 specifically say that there should be equal representation of women and men, and our government has not done much to align the Constitution to the Electoral Act, resulting in less than 11% of women taking up leadership positions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, after the short break, we'll continue this conversation as we know that the Zimbabwean elections are also guided by regional, continental and international bodies. And we ask the key question, to what extent are we meeting these guidelines? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the second segment of this Election Watch program, proudly brought to you by the Civio Institute. Today, we are discussing the outstanding issues, asking the key questions, is Zimbabwe ready for elections? And just before the break, we were giving a little bit of a context on, some lessons learned. If we go back to the 2018 elections, what have we done to make sure that these same mistakes are not repeated? Tamuka, let's talk a little bit about, obviously you were, discussing some of the challenges that are already there. But let's look at what has happened so far in terms of the preparation of elections from an administrative and process perspective. Are we ready for these elections?
Yeah, certainly when we look at the elections and you ask the question, are we ready? We need to ask ourselves, when we are ready, we are looking at it from which perspective. But certainly if we are looking at in terms of meeting the regional guidelines, maybe the SADC principles and guidelines on holding democratic elections, and also meeting some of the conventions, even at the African Union level, or even at the international level, the UN level. For instance, maybe you want to bring in CEDAW, the Convention of Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Shiva has already talked about how the electoral process has been skewed from 14% to 11%. Yeah. And as a consultant and a researcher, I share some of the issues which she was saying. Because, for instance, to run an election, you find that it's very expensive. The Constitution is quite clear that there should be equal representation. But then what should have happened? I think the government should have come up with the realigning our Electoral Act, or even making it mandatory as one of the pre-qualification to say for political parties to be able to qualify to participate in elections. The electoral law should be clear. There should be 50-50 representation. You should have 50% candidates women, 50% candidates, men. And then you also look at, within that, you also look at things like age, the youth, and you look at both male and female. Then you also bring in people like PWDs as well, and either minority. So I think the law has to be deliberate and intentional, because when you look at it, from a perspective of running an election, I remember when we did some youth survey for some of women's organization, we found out that to participate in a primary election, to be a councillor, a person needed a budget of around $5,000 at a minimum. And to participate to be a member of parliament, you need something not less than $10,000 at a minimum. And when you look in our economy, and also now the feminization of poverty, which she was talking about, where women have been historically disadvantaged, then you end up having more males. So it will be the likes of your Tamukas at the expense of women. So when you bring in now these international guidelines and some of the challenges that we have actually raised, and even you want to talk about issues of the right to vote as it is enshrined in the various treaties that SADC, at AU, and even at the UN level, So when you look at it and what has already happened, where you see some voters being disenfranchised, being removed, and then you have got also others like the issues which we're talking, because there is no profit. So you will see that in terms of meeting these standards, we are falling short. And even if you take the reports from SADC, if you are to take the report from SADC for the observation mission, in as much they passed our election, they had issues which thought they had to be addressed, and they haven't been addressed.
Thank you so much, Tamuka, for that. Varaidzo, Tamuka talks about the feminization of poverty. What are some of the potential impacts of these issues or challenges if they are not addressed by the time we reach the voting day on August the 23rd?
Firstly, I'll speak on the number of women. I will go back to the issue of having less than 11% of women vying for parliament and council. The issue, we go back to the issue of the exuberant charges that were charged by ZEC.
Yes.
We can't ignore the issue of nomination prizes. How do a lady who's selling in the street, a vendor, how can she raise $1,000?
Right.
Where will she get such a money? So already the system is already against women who are not economically stable and cannot really raise such monies, which means that we have less women participating in this. And we go back to issues of failing to guarantee gender equality. We see that the government and both the political parties actually lack political will to guarantee gender equality, because nothing much has been done in that regard. And we then blame ZEC for accepting political party lists that are not representing 50-50, as my colleague has said.
Okay. All right. We want to also focus on the regional, continental, and international bodies conventions issue, Tamuka. Are we meeting these guidelines, and what are the challenges there?
Yeah, I had earlier on alluded that, and my general view is that we are not meeting these guidelines. If we were meeting these guidelines, you'd find that some of the disputes that especially the disputes that we have had in this election, I think we've had more court cases than any other election, if you say. We would not have had these court cases because when you look at the regional guidelines, whether at a SADC, African Union, or at a UN level, they are quite clear in ensuring that people participate. The right to vote is treated as sacrosanct. You can't disenfranchise a citizen that you can't vote. And the right to participation is also there, where people have to participate, and they should actually participate as informed participants when they are given all adequate information. So even when you look at the things like the availability of the voters roll, like I mentioned, when you look at the nomination, that were challenges where candidates were being disqualified because they were being told that the person who has nominated you does not fall within the boundaries. But when you look at it, people were not interested, people were not availed with the voters roll, which would have helped to tell you, say, Tamuka, you want to participate, you want to be a councillor in Ward 27. Ward 27 starts from this point to this point. These are the polling station, and these are the people on the vote. So even when I go and seek nominations, I could check with the voters roll. To say, if I had a voters roll, I can check to say, are my papers in order? So already when you look at all those discrepancies, it makes us fail to meet these standards because of the opaque process which I have. Yet, when you look at our regional and international standards, they are quite clear that electoral systems have to be transparent and clear.
Before we go to our last segment, Varaidzo, what sort of conversations are being had to promote women's participation, women with disabilities? I know we have a show here at Heart and Soul where a lot of women with disabilities are saying that, look, we were never given an opportunity to really actively participate, not just as voters, but as contestants as well. What sort of conversations going forward are we having?
I think the first thing is for us is not to see women as a homogeneous group.
Right.
We tend to have we tend to make that mistake where we just look at women as a homogeneous group. Women with disabilities have got special treatments or special issues that they need addressed. So we cannot speak for women with disabilities. we have to sit with them on the same table so that they bring in the issues that they think are pertinent to them.
Yeah.
So as I think in the past, we've just been assuming that when we say we're representing women, we're representing a homogeneous group, including women with disabilities, and we've been leaving them behind in the conversations that we've been having. So from now on, I think there is need for us to make a deliberate effort to make sure that in every sphere that we're having, when we're talking about women issues, women with disabilities are represented so that their views are also heard. And also maybe we can go on to say that there is need for political parties to actually capacitate women leaders within their political parties. Before civil society will do their part, there is need for political parties to do capacity building within their own political parties so that we have women that are confident, women that are knowledgeable of issues that they're going to represent in parliament and in council. Yes.
Well, after the short break, we'll round off this conversation also looking at what can be done by the Electoral Commission to ensure a credible election. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the last segment of the Election Watch program. As today we're focusing on some of the outstanding issues as we draw closer to the Zimbabwe 2023 election, asking the key questions: is Zimbabwe ready for election? Just before the break, I had Varaidzo Jo from the Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence. And of course, she was talking about some of the glaring challenges, especially when it comes to women with disabilities, the feminization of poverty, and what sort of issues can be done or can be addressed to sort of address these challenges. Right now, I still have with me Tamuka, who is an independent consultant. And of course, just before we were talking about some of the guidelines regionally, continentally, and internationally. Of course, looking at Zimbabwe having some of the highest number of court cases, within the region, or, ever before we've had other elections that have actually taken place. Tamuka, welcome back.
Okay.
So what can be done, or what must be done to make sure that we ensure a credible election? Is this even possible? I know that it's obviously too late to make legal changes, but what administrative processes related actions can be done?
Yeah, certainly it's too late, to make legal changes. And also when you look at where time we are, that the 23rd of August nearby.
Yeah.
And we have noted quite a number of challenges that have happened. And already the egg has been broken. But then the question is, do we throw it away or we make an omelette? So which comes back to your question to say what can be done administratively. I would say all is not lost. There is still a window to give some veneer of respectability or credibility to the election so that we reduce the disputes. And this will take a lot of magnanimity from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Because when you look at some of the issues which are actually clouding these elections, already if you go around on social media, there are quite a number of allegations, particularly around issues like treating or vote buying by candidates. And I think this is something which ZEC can engage the political parties, because according to the Electoral Act, giving people material goods in exchange for votes or that's called treating, is not permissible by our laws. So ZEC has to actually stamp its authority on this, because it already has the enabling legislations and the laws are there. So what is needed is implementation. Then there's also the one biggest thing around this election, the issue of disinformation.
Yeah.
For example, I can take my constituency, Pinge South. I have an audio, maybe I'll forward to you after this, where political agents or political actors for a party were actually talking, campaigning, and intimidating villagers, telling them that their vote is not a secret, it can be seen. And they were actually also encouraging traditional leaders to come with their people, which is like the head voting, whereby you shepherd all your people, you come with the register. And even they were even making lies to say we will be able to tell the system is like this, which is not entirely true.
Yeah.
And and this has been awash on social media and even in newspapers. But I haven't seen ZEC going out, carrying out spirited campaigns, disputing this information.
Yes.
To say, because if you listen to that audio, it's quite clear whom it was saying to vote for, and also to say which party. It's quite clear. You don't need a rocket scientist to know who. I mean, it's quite clear because it names and it says whom you should vote for. That is from the president to the member of parliament to the council. That's in Chipinge South. I think it was somewhere in Mahenye area. So when you look at these things, this is not only that case. There are so many cases like this. Then I also look at the issues which are happening, particularly around violence, etc. I know it's the domain of the police. We haven't seen the police being quite, but I think also if ZEC, what it could do is to take a proactive approach, even when it brings all stakeholders, and also tries to engage, because things like to work with the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, political parties, like the incident which we had, I think it's in Glen Norah of Tinashe, where you see a life being lost. This is not something, because the question which we end up asking is, why should we hold the elections if elections mean people have to die? No one should die.
You know, Tamuka, I think you obviously bring out some very important and sad points, of the sad reality that's on the ground. But will this not create further voter apathy as people are being disinformed? As we see lives being lost, as we see ZEC not actually playing its full role to its full capacity. Even if I'm a registered voter, we once had a program where we were looking at the science behind registering to vote versus actually going to vote.
Yes.
There's some sort of challenge there, because at the end of the day, I could be a registered voter, but I can decide not to vote and say, so what's the point when we have our commission not actually, putting its foot down?
Yeah, so you see, this is the role of the commission. Unfortunately, the way the commission sees its work, I think its work is simply providing a machinery. You simply provide, you register people, you provide the voters' roll, and then you wait for people to vote. What I was expecting is that ZEC, maybe within the past 9 months, I would say 9 months, should have been actively encouraging people to vote.
Yes.
And should have been working as well with civil society.
Yeah.
To encourage people to go and vote, to register. Then in this period, particularly when the voter registration for this election has closed, but mind you, voter registration hasn't closed. But for this election, it has closed.
Yes.
But what ZEC could have been now doing, it should have been carrying out campaigns to encourage people to go out in their numbers and vote, because it's one of their primary functions. Not just to say you put a polling station and the voters roll in ballots and then you wait for people to come. It also has to take that kind of active purpose, which also speaks to a progressive role which it begins to play in any progressive society. But then, of course, I think for ZEC, when you look at even the recent survey, like for instance, take the Afrobarometer survey, they actually talk, if you're going to look at it in the urban areas, the surveys were predicting a lot of apathy.
Yeah.
And I think the Electoral Resource Center also recently released one just a week ago or so. When you also look at it, there's also a high likelihood of apathy in the urban. So these are some of the issues that ZEC should be addressing to ensure that citizens participate in elections. They should not just sit and wait. But of course, when you look at how ZEC has been playing and its history, allegations of partisanship, etc., you would find that sometimes it would not see any value in making sure that people go out en masse and vote, because they don't think it's their interest. But in any modern democratic and progressive society,
Right.
ZEC has to play that active role to encourage citizens to go and vote and ensure that it addresses the issues to do with apathy.
Okay. Lastly, let's talk about the issue of partisanship and the history of, I mean, when people see ZEC, they obviously align it with a certain political party, of which we know that election commissions are always supposed to be independent. How do we remove ourselves from this partisanship notion that we have towards ZEC, or what can ZEC actually do?
So basically, this is at a two level. First is a reform of our laws. We need to reform our laws, particularly which speaks to how ZEC is constituted and composed.
Right.
So that we restore the independence of ZEC. Then, secondly, there's also the issue from a political, no, from an administrative perspective, that ZEC on its own, there are certain things which it can do without necessarily needing to change the laws for it to play like for instance, we talked about availing the voters' roll. The law is clear.
Yes.
To say that the voters' roll should be available. Like some of the nomination challenges which we had, people being nominated by people in wrong, should not have happened. This can happen if ZEC does that. Then there's also need to look at how we can change our political culture, and I think this means engaging the political actors, and particularly things to do with political will, because I think the greatest challenge which we face is political will on the part of government, or then also within actors within ZEC. This is why I said we also need to reform ZEC, because the composition of ZEC itself has been a contested nature. When you look at who is in ZEC, allegations of having people with links, to the security sector being involved in ZEC. And I think this is, even Justice Chigumba actually admitted that they do have former security personnel. And even if you would look, I can even give you names of people who were said to have retired. Then later on, you find that they go back again to serve. You find them serving. And so the question, when you bring in serving, but under the guise of retired in courts, members of the security, it actually compromises. It questions the credibility. Because, our constitution is clear that the security forces cannot be involved in any political activities. I think if you see in Ngai already, there's a police officer who is alleged to have attended a citizens' convention rally. And were wearing a t-shirt and chanting, and already that officer is under suspension, is being charged. Which is, and if it is true, it's quite good. That's what the law says. But then the question you have to ask, how many police officers have chanted? How many soldiers have chanted ZANU-PF slogans? We have got, the late General Vitalis Chinawashe declaring that the president is a straitjacket. They will not salute anyone who didn't go to war, live on television. He's not, and quite a number of generals after him coming out to declare their support for the ruling party. So what is good for the goose should also be good for the gander. So if they are suspecting this officer because of supporting Triple C, then fine, which is very fine. We are challenging the authority to say, then go a further, and even those who support ZANU-PF, let also them face the law, so that we apply the law equally. We don't have any superior citizen or more equal citizens than others.
Well, thank you so much. That was Tamuka Chirimamboa, who's an independent consultant. And of course, special thanks to Varaidzo Jo in absentia from the Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence, who's the Gender and Membership Officer. As of course, we were discussing the outstanding issues as we draw closer to the 2023 elections, asking the key question, are we ready for the election? And of course, Tamuka says, all hope is not lost. We still have time to create a level playing field, but also to refine a few issues and a few challenges we've had within our electoral system. Remember, this program was proudly brought to you by the Civio Institute, and we'll see you next time.